All right. So 2 Timothy chapter 2, we're going to just put your finger right there. We're going to look at that in just a minute. We're also going to be looking at Proverbs 13:22. But before we start reading scripture, can I share with you a story of a gal named Clara Frazier? Does anybody in the room know who that is? There might be one hand. There's not a single hand. Sweet. Aaron doesn't even know who she is, so this story is going to be a surprise for all of you. Clara Frazier was an older gal who lived in Texas. She was widowed, and she lived right across the high school in Gainesville, Texas, right across the high school from Gainesville High. And every afternoon, she would be sitting out on her porch while the kids would be coming out of the school. And I got to imagine back then that there weren't a ton of kids at Gainesville High School, but however many there were, whatever they were doing, she didn't like. She was worried that they needed to be in church, that they needed to know the Lord. And so she was wringing her hands. She didn't know what to do. And so she just said, you know what? I'm going to bring my prayer circle over. I'm going to call some trusted friends that I pray with, some ladies that I pray with, and we're going to talk about the problem. And so she brought this group of ladies over on a Tuesday afternoon, I believe it was, and she began to they watched the kids get out of school, and she began to describe what God had been putting on her heart, that these kids needed somebody to come in and make a difference in their life. Now, Clara's prayer circle all agreed that they weren't the people to do that. High school seniors and juniors and freshmen and sophomores didn't, in her estimation, want little old ladies coming over and telling them how to behave. And so they were struggling for what to do. And one of the ladies in the prayer circle spoke up and she said, we may not be the people that God's going to use to make a difference, but we can begin to pray for that person to show up. And so she began to pray, and the timing is a little murky. It's something like 4 or 5 or 6 years later, this youth minister showed up in Gainesville, Texas. He was hired by a local church to start making a difference in the lives of kids. Not kids that go to church, but kids that didn't go to church. And that guy's name was Jim Rayburn. Anybody know who Jim Rayburn is? There's some hands. Now we're catching it. Jim Rayburn is the guy that God used to found the ministry of Young Life. We partner with Young Life here, but that's a different part of the story. But Jim Rayburn, throughout the years, starting in 1940, started this ministry called Young Life and began to bring people on staff. And over the years, Jim Rayburn's ministry led to this guy named Jace Rogers accepting the Lord in high school, in the ministry of Young Life, going off to college, being a volunteer leader for 4 years, and then moving back to the Mid-Cities and becoming an area director for Young Life. And Jace Rogers recruited 3 college guys from the University of North Texas by the name of Ross Rutherford, Joe Coelho, and Bruce Kyer. And those 3 guys, along with 3 gals, started a Young Life Club for the first time ever at a little school in North Central Texas, in the Dallas Metroplex, or in the Dallas suburb of Southlake, Texas. They began showing up my freshman year in high school. They began ministering to our school and to the students. They began making a difference in the lives of people around, and I won't bore you with all the details of how I got to my first club, but it's because of the ministry of those 3 guys that at 2 o'clock in the morning on Thanksgiving morning in 1994, broken, laying on my bathroom floor, I called them and gave my heart to Jesus. And we like to point to those 3 guys, and growing, I've done the majority of my story. I've pointed to those 3 guys, but it wasn't just those 3 guys. It was Jace Rogers who recruited them. It wasn't just Jace. It was Jim Rayburn, and it wasn't just Jim Rayburn. It was Clara Frazier, a little old lady in the 1930s in Gainesville, Texas, sitting on her porch, said, I'm not the person that can make a difference, but I can start praying for that person. God describes that story this way in Proverbs 13:22. It says this, a good man, or we can say a good woman, leaves an inheritance to their children's children, but the sinner's wealth is laid up for the righteous. And so the question I have for you today, the big question in your sermon guide is this, is what will you do with your life that will outlast your life? What will you do with your life that will outlast it? What thing right now can you point to and say, this is going to live beyond me? Have you had a Clara Fraser moment where you've looked at something and you said, I'm not the one that could actually do that, but I can begin to pray for the person that could do that. And on the heels of that big question for the day is the big point, is that the greatest use of life is to spend it for something that will outlast it. I'm sure that Clara Fraser had kids that she loved, her own kids that she loved. I'm sure that she made the difference in the lives of her neighbors and the ladies in her church. And I'm sure that she ministered to her pastor and people around her all the time. I'm sure that she did all of those things. And there might be a person sitting somewhere that can point back to great-grandma Clara Fraser and how she made a difference personally for her. But I would say that the greatest thing that Clara Fraser ever did was none of those things. It was beginning to pray that God would move. And he showed up in a mighty way. She said, I can't do it, but I can spend the rest of my life praying and supporting this young man that's going to show up. I don't know who it is. She said, and when Jim showed up, she began to partner with him and pray for him and begin to support financially and through food and all other kinds of ways. She spent the rest of her life serving Jim Rayburn and the few early people that came on staff with him to make a difference in the lives of kids in Gainesville, Texas and in North Texas. See, the most important thing that she ever did is she made an investment in the life of another person. And I would argue that the most important thing that any of you sitting in this room will ever do is to make an investment in the life of another person. I guarantee you, if I got a microphone and we went around and I said, hey, is there someone that's ever invested in your life? Every single one of you would have an answer to that question without fail. And you may be like nervous, like, I don't know who that is. Like, I promise you, by the time the microphone got around to you, you would know who that person is. Parents, the most important thing that you will ever do in your life is not your work. It's not the vacations that you take your kids on. It's not the cars that you drive or the houses that you grow up, that your kids grow up in. The most important thing that you will do is invest in the life of your child. For better or worse, we're all leaving a legacy. Today is not a checklist about what kind of legacy you're leaving. Today is not a checklist or a how to leave a legacy. We're just going to look at and dive into very briefly what a legacy looks like. Some of you sitting in the audience may be going, my kids are gone. I blew my chance. I don't have a chance to leave a legacy. My kids are already grown and gone, and they're either making good choices or bad choices. Dude, Pastor Keith, our lead pastor, is fond of saying, if you're not dead, he's not done. If you're sitting in this, actually, you know what? I'm going to do something. I'm going to make everybody nervous. If you're under the age of 18, stand up. Come on. If you're under the age of 18, stand up. There's people in the back. Savannah, stand up. There's a bunch of kids. I want everybody to look in the back. You remember all those little guys that made all that noise running out of here earlier today? You guys can sit down. If you don't have kids in your house, guess what? You're surrounded by people that you could be investing in. You could be making a difference in their lives. I'll tell you what, I can't do it on my own. I've got a teenage daughter, a teenage son. I've got another one on the way, and I got a 9-year-old that thinks that she could run the world. I am outclassed and I am outmanned before my feet even hit the ground when I wake up in the morning. I need all the help I can get. It doesn't mean that you're committed forever and a day. It may just be a season. My son Cooper has had people walk with him through his life in seasons. They've walked along with him and helped him through things that I can't help him through. Or there's something that I know for a fact that there are things that my son is nervous to come talk to his daddy about. And so you know what he does? He'll go talk to Aaron about it. And you know what? I don't care. Because I trust Aaron because he's making a difference in my son's life. He's investing in Cooper's life. So over the next few minutes, we're going to take a look at legacy within, not just legacy for legacy's sake, but in the context of this really churchy word that you hear all the time called discipleship. Anybody familiar with what discipleship is? Discipleship is one person investing in another person, helping that other person become more Christ-like through a series of steps. It's something that we're all called to. We're all called to disciple other people. We're all called to be discipled by other people. It's a part of following Jesus. Following Jesus is more than just being morally upstanding. Some of the most moral, righteous people I know are sinners that are going to hell. Following Jesus is more than just being moral. It's more than just having this biblical knowledge by which you can win arguments. Following Jesus is more than just showing up on Sunday morning or playing KTSY or K-Love or whatever the other one is on your radio stations. Following Jesus is about being in relationship with other people and with Him. Paul, writing in 2 Timothy chapter 2, verse 2, says it this way. He says, "What you have heard from me in the presence of many witnesses, entrust to faithful men who will be able to teach others also." Leaving a legacy that outlives you means that you're going to have somebody that's going to live past you to carry on that legacy. And leaving a legacy begins by recognizing the value of relationship. See, no one person can do everything on their own. What you see here in this room takes a small army of people. 10, 15, 20 people show up over the course of really 2 days now, Saturday afternoon and Sunday morning, to get this ready. Leaving a legacy in my son's life takes more than just me. It takes Craig, and it takes John, and it takes Mark, and it takes Aaron, and it takes Tanner, and it takes all of you men sitting there, investing in his life, whether you know it or not. It takes my son making the comment, "Dad, you don't have to worry about me making a bad choice at school." And I'm like, "Well, okay. I mean, that's out of character for you. Why would you say that? Now I'm really nervous. Did you make a bad choice?" He goes, "You don't have to worry about it. Because before it even got home to you, Coach Kaiser would take care of me in the hallway. I can't get away with anything at school." It's an investment in the life of young men walking through the halls of the school. I can tell you, and Coach, I'm going to pick on you. I can tell you how many times I see him having a conversation with a young man that's 22, 23, 24. And it always starts with, "Hey, how's it going? How's life?" But it always turns to, "Coach, man, I'm struck. Coach, I need the coach. Do you have advice? Coach, do you have..." I watch him. I can't blame anybody for that. I put this stage together. Whew. I watch him invest in the lives of young men because he understands the value of a relationship. It's not just ships passing in the night. It's sitting down and taking someone out to coffee. It's inviting somebody over for a breakfast at your house, or scones or coffee or something like that. It's opening up and being willing to invest in the life of another person. Jim Rayburn, when he started Young Life, didn't do it all on his own. We love to, if you're Young Life, like Jim is, like, the guy, he started it, but there's a couple other people. There's some key components of Young Life that without them, Young Life wouldn't look like it looks today. One of them is a guy named Ad Sewell. He started contact work. He discovered that kids were more likely to come to the Monday night club, the fun thing that Young Life does every week, if he went to the school, or he went to their football games, or he went to their basketball games, and he began to make an investment in them personally. Young Life today calls that relational ministry. Jesus invented it. He called the 12 and then he had the 3. He invested in the life of a few to make a difference for all eternity. Not only did he have Ad, but he also had Bill Starr. And Bill is a guy that discovered, he was in Portland, he discovered the need for a committee, a group of adults that would have relationships with the people that were making a difference in the lives of high school kids. Jim and Ad and Bill understood the value of relationship and the difference that it could make in the life of a person. I've heard it said that the four most important or the four most powerful letters in the alphabet are these four: I, C, N, U. Has anybody ever spoke those words into your life? And I see in you the ability to do ... I see in you the ability to be whatever it may be. And it starts by understanding the value of a relationship. Secondly, for godly legacy to happen and for discipleship to take place, it has to be intentional. There has to be a deposit of a sacred trust. Paul says it this way: what you have heard from me, right? That's that relationship that he and Timothy had. What you heard from me in the presence of many witnesses, entrust to faithful men. Don't just hold it into yourself. You've got to learn to give it away. You have to learn to take what somebody invested in you and then begin to invest it in somebody else and pass it along. And that's how legacy is built. Somebody imparts wisdom or speaks into my life. I see in you this. And they begin to teach me and invest in me. And then I turn around and I do it for somebody else. And then they do it for somebody else. And while I'm still doing it for somebody else, and before you know it, what started out with just a one-on-one relationship has turned into something amazing and beyond what you could have ever singularly reached in your entire life. Now, there's a couple of key components of discipleship or components of legacy that are important to understand, and I'm just going to give them to you really quickly. They both start with I, right? As preachers, we got to make it the same. So it's instruction and imitation. Paul encourages Timothy. He actually commands him, instruct, teach to other people also. What you learn from me, teach to other people also. That's how you pass things along. Paul commands Timothy and others around, be followers of me as I'm a follower of Christ. Imitate me as I imitate Christ. What in your life are you living that's making worthy of imitation for somebody that's following after you? Are you taking the time, parents, grandparents, aunts, uncles, to instruct your kids? I get that there are seasons where it feels like you're riding a tornado. Like you're just trying to just hold on till you get everybody to a certain age. I get that, man. I went through that. I joked earlier, sometimes I still feel like I'm in that area. But taking time to intentionally instruct and teach your kids, it doesn't have to be hard, it doesn't have to be complicated, it can be simple. Pick one verse. I would challenge you to do this. Just pick one verse. Talk about it on Monday night when you eat dinner together. If you don't eat dinner together, let me encourage you to just start there. Monday night, set yourself a nice table, cook something. If you're like, we both work, it's crazy busy, we don't have time to cook something, stop by Papa Murphy's on your way home, invest in an Instapot, get something. Start with dinner. Talk about one Bible verse. Just one verse. Dad, mom, just whoever wants to start, just start with you. Just read the verse. Talk about what it means. Ask your kids what they think it means. And then the next day, as you're getting ready, just mention it again. Just read the verse again. Maybe husbands, text it to your wife. Parents, if you have kids that have cell phones, just text it to them in the middle of the day. A couple of things will happen, right? Their guard will be down and they'll text you back and you're like, you're supposed to be in school. What are you texting me for? But just be a gentle reminder. And I guarantee you know what's going to happen? If you have kids that are under the age of 14, that's going to be the first thing they talk about on Tuesday when they get home from school. They're just going to talk about it. Like, Dad, you won't believe what happened. We did this verse talking about loving other people. It was amazing. I had a chance to love somebody on the playground. Girl got hit in the face with a ball and blood everywhere, and I went and just gave her a big hug and said, I love you. That didn't happen. Instruct your kids. Give them something to imitate. Dads, if you're watching football involves you yelling and screaming at the TV, guess what your kids are going to imitate? And I'm preaching to the choir, guys. I think I've gotten better at it. You can ask Becky after the service. She may disagree with me. Parents, man, if you just walk in. Oh, hey, how's school? Man, did you see what she did? Unbelievable. You just keep scrolling. Harper's over here crying. Savannah's begging for attention. And I'm going, did you guys see who tweeted at me on Twitter? Anybody else uncomfortable yet? Should I put it down? It's the value of a relationship. It's the deposit of a sacred trust. It's the power of reproduction. What am I doing that's going to outlast my life? Driving home today, a bunch of big trucks and tractors on the road. God calls me home. What have I done in my life that's going to outlast this? Is what am I doing reproducible? Can somebody else step in and take over? Or is my ministry just all about me? The thing that God's called me to, is it all about Jason and nobody else can do it if I'm not here? See, the thing about being reproducible, it's tough, right? Because you have to trust other people to take this thing that you've nurtured, that you've built up, that you've spent a lifetime maybe investing in. And at some point, you have to go, here, it's yours. And you've got to trust them, and you've got to trust God that He's going to take it the rest of the way. I was reading this morning as the worship team comes up and prepares to lead us in our last song. I was reading the 2020 annual report for Young Life. Actually, this morning, God put it on my heart. I'm like, man, I'm talking about Young Life. I wonder what their stats look like. 2020 was kind of a weird year because of COVID, right? Club looked a little bit different at the beginning of the year. Camp looked a little bit different. We couldn't have as many kids show up. Everything was just a little bit different and a little bit strange. So I wonder what God did in Young Life in 2020. Let me give you the stats for the ministry of Young Life in the year 2020. We have over 18 properties that Young Life does international camping and domestic camping at. The average weekly club attendance this last year, 355,428 high school kids hearing the gospel every Monday night across this country. 8,371 different Young Life clubs taking place all across the globe. Japan, Germany, Finland, England, Africa, Europe, Canada, Mexico, Argentina, everywhere. Last summer, 141,985 kids went to camp last summer and heard the gospel of Jesus Christ. Diana, how many kids from Middleton gave their hearts to the Lord last year? I forgot. 11. Kids whose eternity is different. Dude, this is the amazing one. Across the world, 1,312,388 high school kids known by name in a relationship with their Young Life leader. And it all started with a little gal in Gainesville, Texas named Clara Frazier. It said, I want to make a difference. So I'm going to start praying. I want to see what God shows up and does. Would you guys stand and join the worship team as we sing this last song?